Thanks for tuning into the Pacey Performance Podcast. So this evening, I am delighted to welcome Lachlan Penfold. So welcome back to the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Rob. Good to be back. It's been a while, but yeah.
It has been a long time, hasn't it? It has been a long time.
I couldn't believe it when you said it was like 3.5 years. I'm like, holy.
Yeah, I think you...
Where did all that time go?
You just got back from the States at that point, I think, maybe?
Yeah, it could have been, yeah.
2017.
So, anyway.
Yeah, okay, nice.
We're getting old quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In the last 7 months has felt like 7 years, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So anyone that doesn't know who you are, you just want to give us a quick run through of background, education, experience, and what you're doing at Storm.
Yeah, okay. So my role at the Storm is I'm the head of performance there. And so I've been there 4 years now. Previous to that, I had a similar role, different titles. As no doubt there's a lot of discussion in our industry about names and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, similar role at a basketball team in the States, the Warriors. Before that, I was at the Australian Sevens and then the Sydney Roosters in the NRL again, and then Brisbane Lions in the AFL. And previous to that, I'd worked with a number of Olympic sports, primarily water polo, softball, but also some track and field, swimming. I worked at the QAS, the Queensland Academy of Sport, which is one of our institutes within our National Institute program. And then if we keep going further back, Queensland Reds Rugby Union in the Super 12 at that stage, and Brisbane Bandits baseball, and I think that'll probably do. That's enough. Yeah.
Well,
so I started as a strength and conditioning coach. And then, sort of moved, did different roles, either, the whole kit and caboodle of strength and conditioning, so to speak, or as a speed coach or as a conditioning coach, or, I coach some track and field athletes as an 800 runner. So, there's obviously a little bit of everything there. Sometimes just a strength coach for sports like swimming or rowing or things like that. But as you evolve and develop in your career, you tend to take on more or bigger roles within that realm, and moved into sports science, sports medicine coordinator roles with water polo and softball, and then head strength and conditioning coach, and then head of performance. It sort of evolves as I guess the profession's evolved as well, and those roles have evolved. Yeah.
One thing I'm always interested to hear when people make that progression from coach, being on the floor, being on the field, to that more managerial leadership role. Obviously, this happens in every industry. You get really good at what you're doing, and then the next progression is to lead and manage. Obviously, not everyone is set up to lead and manage. But how have you made that transition? Has that transition been tough for you? Have you gone anywhere for guidance on management and leadership, or has it just been quite natural for you in that progression?
Yeah, good question. I guess so. For me, when I was at the Sydney Roosters, we had a new coach come in, Trent Robinson, in 2013. And one of the things that he said to me was that he didn't want me working as much in a hands-on role. So previous to that, it was probably more of a head of strength and conditioning role with the Lions and the Roosters, even though sometimes the titles might have implied a head of performance. But if I look back now at what I'm doing now compared to then, it was more of a head of strength and conditioning. So my role was, to drive the physical development and try and coordinate and integrate a department of both physical preparation and injury management to get the best result, and also to, I don't want to say control, but influence and direct training, skills training as well, within an overall loading scheme. But most of my time was spent writing programs and coaching athletes in the physical area of speed, conditioning, strength, etc. And then I think back to the Lions, GPS got introduced in about 2006. And so all of a sudden I'm doing that as well. So I'm trying to work out GPS and how to do it and what does it mean. And I'd get home after training at 7 and I'd have dinner, and then I'd stay up till 1 or 2 o'clock trying to do the GPS for it and stuff like that. But I don't know if I did a head of performance role of how I see it now in a good way. And so when Trent came to the Roosters, he sort of said to me, I don't want you doing as much of the hands-on. He said, I want you to be able to watch and observe and make judgments on whether we're doing the right thing or we're going in the right direction, and how do we make changes in that way? Which, if you're a strength and conditioning coach, that's what your identity is. I'm the person on the field, in the gym, working with the players, and I'm the one that they look at and work with. And all of a sudden, you're taken out of that role to a degree, and someone else is in charge of writing the programs under your guidance, direction, and they're responsible for that program, and you're there assisting them, but you're not the man, so to speak, doing it. And so that becomes it can become a hit to your maybe ego or identity of, well, hang on, well, what am I? And players are really receptive and understanding, and so of course they walk around going, mate, you do nothing anymore, all you do is just stand there and tell everyone else to do stuff. So it makes you feel really good about yourself. But I was, I like to read a bit, and I was reading one of Alex Ferguson's books, and I've told this story before, but the gist of it was, when he was coaching in Scotland, his assistant coaches came up and said, we may as well leave. We're wasting our time being here because you don't let us do anything. No, you're really important to me. Listen, Alex, all we do is put witches' hats around and you run everything and we do nothing. So we think we should leave. And he goes, no, I don't want you to do that. And they said, well, okay, you sit in the stand for a week and let us run things under your direction and see how it goes. And he said that was a massive eye-opener for him, because all of a sudden he could see and observe players and how things went and how others were working. Whereas when you're down there on the field and your head's in it, you can't have that overview of things. And so that's sort of one of the philosophies I tried to take was, okay, this will give me a better perspective of where the whole program's going rather than just my specific area. And so I think, at least for me and how I work, that's a really important point, is that I have to, if I'm the head of performance is not physical performance. Performance is football performance on the field. And I have to think as though I'm the head coach, and what is the most important thing for us to do to become a better football team. And sometimes it might be that physical component, but other times it's like we need to do more skills work. So one of the things that I think people in my role or my profession anyway, is they get caught up in their area. Okay. No. We have to do this fitness work, or they have to reach these fitness standards or this strength standard or whatever else. No, we have to make them the best football team possible. And there's a multitude of ways to get there, but never forget that it's about developing a football player, not a physical specimen to play football. So I don't know where we started or how we got there, but anyway,
it's fascinating. It's one thing that I picked up on, and it's an obvious thing to pick up on, but is the word identity. And I think that's something that, not that I've been in your shoes, but it resonates with me that when you're on the floor, you're writing a program, it's tangible, it's there in front of you. You work with the player, it's very tangible, it's there, people can see it. When you're in that kind of overseeing role, maybe you don't get to the end of the day with a new bit of paper with some more numbers and words on it. It's quite hard to maybe objectify what you're doing and how you're doing it. Was that something? Am I just making that up, or would that be something that you could relate to?
No, it is in a way. So like I'm at all our strength sessions, and obviously we do all our work on the field in terms of our speed, conditioning. Most of the time it's integrated within our football sessions. But so I'm at every training session. But like I said, I'm not the guy running the strength session. We have a guy called Dan DePasco who runs our strength session. He does a fantastic job. He does a better job than me. And that's really important that I allow him to do that job and do it as well as he can within the constraints of how we want to develop football players. And he does a really good job of that. There's a saying, I'm not going to buy a dog and bark myself. It's like, and I've done that. And I think back to some of my earlier years, and I didn't let my staff do the best job possible because I tried to control everything. And so part of it is about letting go of control, which is a difficult thing, because at the end of the day, if something doesn't work out, the head coach normally comes to you and rips you a new arsehole, not anyone else, right? So you need to make sure that you've got things right, and that's why part of your role is developing a really good performance team that are all on the same page and understand where we're going and what the philosophy is, and that at the end of the day, you're going to be judged on football performance. Like, I don't care if someone's squat numbers or bench numbers in terms of strength training don't move greatly. That doesn't mean anything to us. It's how they apply that strength on the football field. Okay. And Dan doesn't either, like, he obviously wants to see guys improve, but it's about how do we make these guys better football players. So coming back to your point about identity and at the end of the day, I'll do a lot of things that people don't see, because that's about how do I make the program better. That doesn't bother me. You've got to be comfortable in yourself and what you're doing and your knowledge of how things are working. I spend a lot of time with coaches trying to work out what they want out of players, and also, in terms of what they want out of, or how they want us to play football, and how we want to develop our training sessions. And there's a lot of back and forward and those sort of things. So there's a lot of parts that, if you walked in and you watched training sessions, you wouldn't see it. You wouldn't think that I do a lot, so to speak. Like, I'm not running the training sessions, but there's a more of a background coordinating, influencing sort of role there, as well as, like you said, guiding, influencing training sessions to make sure that we're going in the right direction.
Right, people listening to this who are the person in Dan's role,
yep,
and there's someone above them. Does this kind of, what you're talking about here with letting go to a certain extent and letting that person do their work,
yep,
can that be replicated from the level below? So Dan to an assistant, and an assistant to an intern. Is that a similar dynamic?
Yeah, well, yes, possibly, but I think there comes a level of knowledge and experience.
Okay.
So obviously, if we had an intern, we're not going to say, "Hey, listen, you just go
Fill
off
your boots,
do whatever you want."
Yeah.
And so obviously a degree of trust has to come into it, but that's obviously how you develop staff members, is by giving them. I don't want to say lesser roles, but smaller roles, and letting them develop programs. So, as an example, one of our strength and conditioning coaches took on a lot of the rehab work. So, a guy called Hal Marsden. So we would obviously guide him, but then it's up to Hal and the other guy who was with him, the physio Chris Tandy. It's up to those guys to develop programs, and then we'll sit down and go through them with them, and add in our 2 cents worth, so to speak. But it's giving them that control and ability to write, direct, and influence those rehabilitation training programs within the guise of what we want to achieve as a football club. And they do a really good job of that. And so that's how they're going to develop as well.
I don't want to embarrass you here, but it's not a good start, is it? But I thought I didn't want to have you come on here and not chat about the successes that you've had in your career. So that got me doing a little bit of digging. Wikipedia, going back and forth with your LinkedIn when you were at certain places. So 2010, Sydney lost in the final. And let me know if these are right, by the way. 2013 winners.
Yeah.
The Roosters.
So I wasn't at the Roosters in 2010. I was at the Lions.
First mistake.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So 13.
13 I was there then. Yep.
So 16 with Golden State, lost in the final.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. 2017 winners with the Storm. 2018 lost in the final. 2020 winners. Yep. So there's some good, there's incredible success in there. But is there things that you can take from each one of them different environments, from the Roosters winning 2013 to the Warriors losing the final in 2016 to where you are now, in terms of the environment that you see around you every day? Do you pick up the commonalities amongst them three environments? Although maybe very different.
Yeah, look, I think there's certainly some commonalities within there. You know, in all honesty, one of them is good players. Okay, like I've also been in places where there's been good players and we haven't been as successful, and other places where I think I've done a really good job, but we haven't had the players and we haven't been that good. But one of the things is you need to have good players. You know, like if you want to have a winning environment, you have to have good players. But how they become good and how they sustain being good is also different things as well. You know, so I think as part of good players, you know, you also need good coaching, and you also need a good organisation within that that allows. So the organisation allows the players and the coaches, and when I say coaches, I'm also going to refer to performance staff because it's all one. Okay, your football department, so to speak, or basketball or wherever you are. They allow that to do their job, so to speak. So that's really important. I think within that, your good players, or maybe it's not even good players, it's great or excellent players, have a drive to become better. Sometimes it's a drive to prove themselves, but most of the time it's a drive to become better. And that drive is able to influence other players. So some of those great players are able to influence other players to become better. You need a strong coaching group that want to keep driving players as well, that aren't content to be to rest on their laurels and you know, accept that this is good enough, that they always want to get better. And obviously you need I believe you need a good, let's call it, performance team that can prepare players as well within the context of what you're trying to achieve on the football field, on the basketball court, wherever it is. So there's a whole lot of different things that go into it, you know, and I don't know if you want to explore different areas or whatever, but
no, absolutely. And one thing that you said there is leverage, and leveraging them, not only good players but the excellent, the world-class players that are in the club. How do you do that from a physical preparation to help get what you want from the group by leveraging them excellent players who you may have one, if lucky, 2 or 3?
I think like for me it's about they set a standard, and that's a standard that others can aspire to, and so it's not like I would go to a great player and say, look, I need you to do this, or tell these other players that they have to do this, you know, basically try and do your job for you. But if they set a standard, then other players look up to them, and they'll tend to follow that. Most of the time, those great players, you don't need to ask them to do those things because they're already doing them, because that's part of their greatness. So it's about reinforcing those habits, I guess, and perhaps you can reinforce those qualities to other players. Have you noticed how so-and-so never misses a recovery session, never is late to training, is always doing extras out on the field after training, etc., you know? And so you can reinforce to other players the good habits that those players have. And so that's probably an important thing to try and do. But I don't think that you can get those players to try and sell your message for you.
Okay.
By asking them to it. They'll do it because of how they do it. Yeah.
One thing that has come up, as you can imagine, a lot, but probably not for a while actually, is the fluffy word of culture. Mm-hmm. And I suppose how difficult it is to communicate on a podcast like this. But in terms of creating the culture that goes on to win 2 championships in 3 years, how do you go about communicating that amongst your leadership team, head coach, coaching staff? And how do you try to communicate that down to like we've said, to the excellent players, and that filters down to the good players, the youth players, etc., How do you go about, firstly, getting hold of that, and then secondly, how that then tries to be pulled down into the rest of the group?
Yeah, it's a good question. Every place has their own culture, and I think that's probably important, is that you don't try and implant a culture in there that isn't you or isn't what you believe. Now, for me in my role, a lot of the times the culture comes from the organisation and probably the head coach and perhaps senior players, especially if, like the Melbourne Storm has been a very good football team for 20 years. So it's not like I've suddenly turned up and they've become good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Hopefully I've helped improve them in some ways. But so it's like, the organisation has to work out what's important and what do they stand for and how they're going to go about things. And the head coach will drive a lot of that culture through the way he is and his actions, and it's important for everyone to get on board. And so I'll take you back to an example at the Roosters. The Roosters were a good team, but they were in and out because they used to buy a lot of players. And so they'd buy good players, and then they would sometimes become good, and then sometimes they'd be shit, because good players aren't always good people, right? And so sometimes some of the players they bought weren't the best people, and therefore they didn't really care about the organisation or the place. They just cared about playing and getting their money and those sort of things. So they had good teams, but they didn't have, a great culture, if that's the right word. And so one of the things that Trent Robinson did when he came in, and this is not saying anything, we're not trying to be disrespectful to what went before, but he's like, I don't want this place to be a transit lounge anymore. We're not going to just keep buying good players. We want to develop good players and have good people, and it's up to us to get these players to understand about the history of the club and want to be here and want to stay here for their careers versus just coming here for money. And so that was an important, I guess, in a way, cultural turning point for the club, I guess, in some ways, and they've obviously gone on to be very successful. Now, you look at a place like the Storm, and I've come in there in the last 20% of their 20-year, successful run. But, Craig Bellamy's the coach there, and he's been there for a long time. And, one of his main things is hard work or work ethic. And we work hard, and the players all know that if they come here, they have to work hard, and that's an expectation. We don't have dickheads there, and whether that's a conscious thing of not getting them there, or whether that's once you have them there that they get rid of them quickly, we lose players that are great people and great players because we can't afford to keep them, but we'll also lose some people because they may not want them there anymore. And so that's a really important part as well. But it's like you've got to be able to sustain that, so how do you go about doing that? Well, obviously you've got to have high standards and expectations. You've got to live those. You can't let little things go by. You've got to have hard conversations when they're needed with players. I guess be genuine and honest about how you go about things. You've got to make it a great place to be at. So one of the things, we had a discussion before we came on about, we went up to a hub and we were there for, I think, 4 months. So that could either have made us or broke us in a way, because we were living in a resort and we ended up being quarantined. So we could only leave that place for training or for playing, and otherwise we had to stay within there. And so it's like, how do you ensure that people are going to get on well that whole time? You're going to have probably differences of opinions and that sort of stuff. But on the whole, we had a really happy, united group of players that whole time. Okay. And obviously if you're winning, that helps. So if we had lost every game, we may not have found that, but we did. So winning cultures help winning, but winning helps winning cultures. But also, there was a lot of work done by the football staff off the field in terms of trying to make sure that players had a good time together, but also had their own time. So we made sure we gave them space and things like that. And we're respectful of the needs to be able to either be part of the group or not part of the group at different times and things like that. So, there's a whole lot of different things that go into it. But I think, having good people is a big part of it, and having an understanding or having an organisation that knows where they want to go and what they're about is really important, and then that everyone has to buy into that. So if I don't buy into the ethic of hard work, well, I probably won't be there, and so that's important. It's like the other thing is that sometimes you can get some bad influences, and it's how do you deal with those as well. So it's probably not made the news over there, but over here in Australia at the moment, so we have our SAS, which is our elite army soldiers. I think you call them the SAS as well, like the Navy SEALs. Yeah. Okay, and so
there's something in the news today. There's something.
Yeah. So all of a sudden there's this big report, and they've been slammed because a group of approximately 25 soldiers within this regiment have, let's call it, gone rogue. And done things that are outside the ethics of what that group stand for. Now, unfortunately, like, I have tremendous respect for servicemen, and what they do and how they put their lives on the line and those sort of things. But now, unfortunately, that whole regiment is tarnished because of the actions of some people. And the little bit of reading that I've done through the news is that rogue group of soldiers was allowed to develop that way because they weren't stopped. Because the head of the organisation, so to speak, or some of the commanders didn't stop some of their bad traits, habits, whatever, in the early days, and it just grew and grew and grew. And so that's an important part of culture, is how do you stop the bad influencing the good, and is an organisation strong enough to do that? Mm-hmm. Because if you take it into a sporting sense, you can have very good players that are bad influences, but they don't want to do anything to reprimand the good players in case they leave or spit the dummy or whatever else. But it ends up having a really bad effect on that whole group, mm-hmm. And it can destroy your culture. So, yeah.
Another thing that I'm really interested in, and it fits right in with this chat around culture, is your hiring of performance staff around you. Mm-hmm. How important is cultural fit for you when appointing someone? Yes, the technical, yes, the qualifications, yes, the experience, but how much are they going to actually fit in here in what we've got going on, all the things that you've just described successfully? Yeah. How important is that?
I'll look massively so, and more so now than previous, because I understand it better.
Okay.
So
what do you understand? What do you understand more?
Well, so in the past, you'd probably go for the best qualified person, right? But they may not be the best person for the job. Are they willing to? I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say compromise, but are they willing to ensure that whatever area they're responsible for is working in with what you're trying to achieve as a football team versus what they think is important, So, an example, a long time ago, I was working with the football team, and we're a brand new organisation and a bit sort of disjointed in a way. And the guy in charge of the strength program is like, mate, these boys need to squat today because that's what they have to do. And I'm like, some of these boys are busted and they can't squat today. I don't care. They have to squat today. This is a really basic example, but it's like, no. For the good of our performance on the weekend, doing that will actually probably be a negative for them. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, you need to take a bigger picture view of things, not just be isolated to your area and worried about your area. At the end of the day, we're going to be judged on how well the team does on the field, not because your squats went from 140 kilos to 145 kilos over the course of a season. So there's that willingness to have a bigger picture view of things is really important. The other thing is, which again you understand more so now, is people have to be prepared to give and take honest feedback. Okay, not tell you everything's good and then go bitch about you behind your back or someone else in the team, and you have these little clusters of bitching and whatever else. It's like, if you can't give and take honest feedback, then you don't want those people as part of your team, because they're going to be a destructive part of the culture of your team. Same as that good player that's a bad influence. It's like, you don't want those people around. And I'd rather take someone who had less experience, but was a good person and understood those things, than someone who's more highly qualified. The other thing is, you also want people that are prepared to challenge. So again, I'll talk about Dan Pasqua. Like, Dan will always come and say, he goes, look, take it or leave it, but I'll give you a couple of things. Boom, and away he goes. And so it's like, I encourage and I want that, because I always need to know whether I'm on the right track. And sometimes we all get locked into our little way of thinking, and it's like, hang on, I didn't think about that. So what you need is that people are going to challenge you, and not just me, but I need the physio to be able to take it, that I can go up and say, how come you're doing this? In the past, when I've done hamstring stuff, we would normally do that. What do you think about it? And you go, look, yep, I understand that, but I think these reasons here, boom, boom, boom. Okay, that sounds fine. Let's see how it goes. If it works, great. If it doesn't, okay, let's go revisit this. Is there a different way to do it? So they're the most important things, I think, in terms of your staff, is that they can give and take honest feedback. They're willing to challenge. They're willing to learn, and they're good people. Because in all honesty, the other stuff's easy. Like, we can get hung up on, all sorts of different loading systems, periodization systems, chains, bands, this, that, whatever else, velocity-based training. That's the easy shit, in all honesty. It's how do you work as a team, and how do you work to put a program together. And I'm not denigrating strength coaches here, and you could say the same about speed work and whatever else, but it's like the nitty-gritty of the program is the easy part. It's how do you work to provide a football program versus components of physical development within a football program. I know you've had Kelvin Giles on the podcast, and Kelvin's a great mentor of mine, has been for 20 odd years. And one of the things that Kelvin said to me was, the program's the easy part. It's all about the delivery. It's how do you as a coach inspire or get the best out of players? He said anyone can write a strength program, but it's what they do with that strength program. And that's a really important part as well, is how does that coach convey to the players that this is what we need to be doing, and you need to believe in this and do it, and you'll become a better player from it. Yeah.
Again, staying on this theme of culture, your year in the NBA.
Yep.
Just from the outside,
yep,
having seen a bit of rugby league and seen a bit of the NBA, I
yep,
presume what you find in the role is very, very different.
Yep.
In terms of the culture. Can you
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on whether I'm talking nonsense or whether that was the reality?
Look, it is. It's they're totally different sports, and so a friend of mine who used to work with me at the Lions, Alex Moore, he was at the Cleveland Cavaliers,
Okay.
and I was talking to him about it, and he said, "Look, I can tell you all about this job." He said, "But until you actually live it, you won't understand it." And never a truer word was spoken, so to speak. Look, from my perspective as a professional, I have much greater enjoyment out of what I do with football, because I believe that I can have a greater influence. So the NBA, there's some fantastically talented players there, and but it's an entertainment industry in the fact that you could play somewhere between 3 to 5 games a week. You're traveling in all different places. You're getting in late at night. You're getting up. You're playing the next day. It's a performance compromised and I guess preparation compromised environment, because it's about putting on the show as many times as possible. Now, basketball, you can obviously play more times in a week than you can play football. And when I say football, obviously I'm talking rugby league versus soccer. But but there's a degree of compromise to that, which I found it took a while to get used to. Also, what you can do within that environment is limited, because you can't expect a lot out of the players because of what they're going through from a playing and travelling perspective. It's a very, in a way, individually driven sport. Players have come through their own systems, their colleges. They've got their own people that they confide in, work with, and at times there is a distrust, so to speak, of what they'll call management. You know what I mean? Which is basically anyone to do with the team who's not a player.
Okay.
Because of the cutthroat nature of the game, and the fact that there's many examples of this. But we got on a plane in Los Angeles, and we landed in Atlanta 4 hours later. And one of our players that was with us in Los Angeles, by the time we got to Atlanta, all of a sudden he's in a different team. So he didn't leave the flight midway through, but we didn't throw him out halfway over. Yeah, but when we landed, it's like, oh, by the way, you've been traded. So there's that sort of whatever fluidity of movement between teams. And so therefore they become a little bit reliant upon themselves and distrustful of everyone else. So look, when I was at the Warriors, people always said this is a great team. The way they get on, the way they work together, you won't see that anywhere in the NBA. And what I was used to here in Australia, I'm thinking, they all seem to get on pretty well, but this is not great. This is good, but this is not great. But for NBA standards, it was. And one of the players, he said to me, look, I can't wait till you go to a bad team. He said, you'll have players in the locker room with guns and stuff like that hate each other. And now he might have exaggerated a bit, but there is always those underlying tensions. And I've said this on numerous occasions, a lot of that comes from the head. Okay, so you look at a guy like Steve Kerr as a coach, he's a very humble, down-to-earth person. You look at the best player on that team, Steph Curry, he's for what he is, the most humble, hard-working person that you'll come across. Like, this guy is, and I didn't understand the level of it when I got there, but this guy's an absolute superstar, and he's just a down-to-earth bloke who wants to get better. And he'll work his ass off every day to become better. And if he's the best player in your team and he's a great person like that, it's very hard for others to suddenly start having superstar type demands, And so I think that's a really important part, again, coming back to culture. You look at the Melbourne Storm right now. You've got Cameron Smith, who's the captain, who has played more games than anyone else. The eternal debate of, is he the greatest player in the game? Someone else can answer that question, but he's a great player, and what he's achieved over nearly 20 years of football is unbelievable. But he's just a normal person who gets in there and works hard every day. They're the sort of people that you need as the head of your cultural program, so to speak, even though they're not officially there. But so I don't know if I answered your question.
No, absolutely.
Around a bit.
No, it's great. I mean, it's interesting that the journey over there in the States. How did it affect? I mean, you talked about the players being performance compromised. What was it like for you as a coach?
Oh, look,
in your role, clearly you've got to be compromised, like health-wise, just generally keeping up with.
Generally you are. Again, Alex sort of warned me. He said you watch the first year, you'll put on a heap of weight because So you look after the players really well. So we provided breakfast and lunch for them, and they were good meals. And then whenever we travelled, obviously there was, the best meals possible that we'd try and organise for them. And there's buffets all the time. And so there can be a temptation to eat too much. And obviously your sleep compromised because you get in late and things like that. What I found was that it affected my family life way more than what I wanted to.
Okay.
So a couple of things. So when you're away, obviously you're away. When you're at home, we would have most of the time a shoot around in the morning at 10 o'clock. And so you'd normally be in there by 8 because players would start coming through then, so which means you leave at 7. So most of the time the kids are probably maybe not out of bed yet, or maybe just. You'd get home somewhere around about 2:30. I'd go pick my kids up from school, and then I would normally leave at about 3:30 to get to the arena by 4:30 when the first players started coming in to play the game that night, and then get home about 11:30. So that's a home game. You don't see your family for very much time. Obviously, when you're not playing, you've got training, and you'd probably be in there from 8 till 2 or something like that. So you get a bit of time, but you're away all the time. So in football, you're away on a weekend, and you develop a bit of a rhythm and a cycle to life. This one, you go away from a Tuesday to a Saturday, and then from a Wednesday to a Monday, and like you just don't know what day it is. All you know is that you're playing New Orleans in 2 days' time, and whatever. Or I'm going away next week, and I'm away for however long, and so it compromises your family life a lot. I have 2 daughters, and one was playing soccer and one was playing softball on a Saturday and a Sunday, and I didn't see one game of either for 3 months. It's like, okay, this is sort of fucked up and not really where I want to be in my life. And what I felt was that I used to sit on the plane and look, and a lot of our coaches were ex-players, and performance staff were people that were in there, and it's only like their NBA life is. They're going to be doing this, and they think this is normal. But for me, and this is only my perspective, it wasn't normal, and I didn't enjoy that part of things. I obviously enjoyed. We had a good team, and we played some beautiful basketball, and it was a fantastic journey to be part of. And if I was a basketball diehard, perhaps I'd want to stay there and be there forever. But I just felt like there was a massive compromise in my personal life that I didn't enjoy. Now, maybe I could have done things better in terms of how I handled and managed all that. But, so it was it's not all, great stuff in some ways. Yeah.
But you don't regret going?
No, not at all. Because I don't regret. I try not to regret anything in life, because everything's an experience that you're going to become better from, if you're willing to become better. So I don't regret doing anything in my time, as long as I can. If it was a negative experience, and I'm not saying the Warriors was a negative experience in any way, but as long as I can learn and become better from anything that I do, you can't regret it, because there's lessons there that you'll take on for the rest of your life. So I don't regret it at all. And like I said, hey, if you're going to come in and work for a year in the NBA, that was a pretty good year to do it.
Absolutely.
Except for the last 4 minutes of Game 7 of the final, where we ended up losing. But not at all. And I met some wonderful people along the way, and was privileged to witness, what I'll call basketball greatness, with some of the players that we had there. Absolutely. Don't regret it for a second.
So for someone that's, as we talked about, these different environments, different players from different generations, how have you had to change your delivery, the way you interact with players, what you expect from them, what you don't expect from them, as you've moved through your career and dealing with younger athletes as you and the rest of us get older? Good question. Look, I guess I always try and be honest, and like, I am who I am, and if I try and be someone different, then I'm not being honest in a way. But everyone's different, and you need to
try and understand how people work as a person and what resonates with them and what's important to them and those sort of things. I certainly don't get it right all the time, and I sometimes still struggle to make a connection with some players, because in life, if you put yourself in a room with 40 people, you're going to get on better with some than others, and you're not going to make a connection with some, and so you have to really work at that. And so, you've got to find that balance between, I guess being friendly is not the right word, but how do you develop friendships with players? But you also have to keep in a way, a professional level there, because at sometimes you might be required to, have strong words or honest words with that player, and it's like, okay, you need to have that boundary, I guess, in a way. But the main thing is trying to treat them as people and respect them as people. That's really important. I think understanding, I'm trying to work out my kids at the moment, and I'm not doing a great job with my 15-year-old at times because, my wife tells me it's just because she's 15, and it's like, I need to be better at that. But, it's how do you find out what makes people tick? That's the important part, and understanding. So, this is a long time ago, but I still remember I was at the Lions and we had some young players in, and I tried ringing one of the players and got his message bank. So I left a message, and he texted me back about 10 minutes later. I went, he must have had his phone. I'll give him a call now. So I ring him straight after I get the text, straight to message bank, left another message. 2 minutes later, I get a text. I'm like, rightio, okay, I understand this. I'll just text him. You know what I mean? Like some people don't want to have direct verbal communication. Maybe he was busy. I don't know. But, it's trying to understand how different players work. And I guess I'm a bit old school. I'd rather talk to people than text them. But I understand now, now I'll probably text people a lot more because that's just the way life is. How do you communicate? How do you go about things? Sometimes people can handle honest feedback, and sometimes people can't. So you have to work out a way to still deliver it, but in a different manner. Yeah.
So it was something that I struggled with early on, was that transitioning from friend to professional, and that boundary of I suppose the swing of when you're one and when you're the other, and deciphering what person I have to be. Is that something, like you say, is like you said before, is that something that you're still working on? Is that something that you kind of picked up via a certain experience? Is that something that you feel like you've kind of nailed?
No, I don't think you've ever nailed it. You know what I mean? I think, like for me personally, I actually need to be better at making connections, because I think I probably at times will but try and keep that professional boundary there more than what I should. And I need to be better at making connections at times. Mm-hmm. And so that's my work on, you know what I mean? So it is a difficult thing, and it's a really difficult, especially for young coaches coming through, because at times they're also the same or similar age. Yeah. See, as life goes on, I now become, I'm one of these old fellas, so I'm not that same age. Whereas some of the younger coaches are that same age, so there is a temptation to go out with players and do things. But, again, you've got to find the right time. So there might be a time when there is a social occasion with the club and, everyone's drinking and whatever else, and you have a good time, and that's good. But if you're going out on a Friday night with them all the time and getting drunk, then how can you turn up on a Monday and tell them that, they need to be better with their diet and their skin folds and those sort of things? So that's the thing that young coaches need to find the right balance with, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question before I let you go, because I've really enjoyed this. It's been great. Where do you go for your influence? Where do you go? Yeah. Is it books? Is it a certain genre of video? What is it? Where do you go for your influence?
Look, good question. So, and I think it probably follows an evolution of your career in a way. So, early days, I had guys like Kelvin Giles and Vern Gambetto as mentors of mine, and I did a heap of reading about different types of training, because you want to become the best that you can, and those guys had massive influence on me in terms of my development, and then also all the work that I do in terms of reading. And then it's like, okay, like I said before, some of that is easy because the amount of knowledge that you can gain in terms of physical training is going to be well in excess of what you're actually going to apply within what you do. So I could keep reading every strength article and conditioning article and speed article under the sun and become the smartest bloke ever and understand everything. But am I going to be able to apply that? No. Okay, so what else do I need to understand? I need to understand how to be a better coach. How do I relate to people? And so I read a lot of coaching books, So most of the time those books are written by head coaches, classic examples. I'm just looking up at my bookshelf here, but, like Phil Jackson or, Clive Woodward, Rod McQueen, those sort of guys, or they write about Alex Ferguson, things like that. But that gives you an understanding of how to coach different people. And then there's other basic coaching books. And then there's also areas of personal development, and then also organizational type of books, and Damien Hughes has written about the Barcelona way and different things like that, So to me, it's all about how do you develop an understanding of how everything works in those sort of areas. And, there's a guy called Andy Walsh who used to be at Red Bull and he's now with Liminal Collective. And so, long story, but when I was going through uni, I actually had a bit to do with Andy and we knew each other. And then I didn't see him for 20 years. And I turned up at this leaders conference in the US and he's giving this presentation on the Stratus project. So I'm like, what the hell? And so I reconnected with Andy. And so a guy like Andy Walsh, for me, is probably a newer mentor in the fact of how he thinks about performance. And he was looking at areas of, mindfulness and neural control and, basic things like emotional control, putting people through breath hold, for big wave surfers and how do they react under pressure and those sort of things well before it became popular. And like a lot of people are doing those sort of things now, but it's like, so he's got this different perspective of performance. And one of the things that we've spoken about is how do you get better? Like when you get to the elite or mastery level, it becomes about mastery of self versus mastery of the physical, because one of the things we talk about, there's only so many laps you can run. You can only get so much better physically. It's like how do you develop your mastery of yourself, and a lot of that will come down to mental and emotional control, and how do you put players in different situations to handle that. So, I don't know. It's just there's all these different influences, and hopefully it all goes into making a better person, like me, a better person, and the people I work with better people, and also better performers. So yeah,
Mm-hmm. Have you listened?
There's a heap of different things that will influence you.
Have you listened to Damien Hughes' podcast?
So I actually did a course the other day and he was a speaker there, and so I listened to one of his podcasts, and it was really good. So the problem is that there's so much information available now.
Yes.
I don't have time.
Yeah.
I'm not pissing in your pocket here, but your podcast is one of the first ones that I sort of started to listen to.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh wow, there's all these other podcasts, and now like there's this list of interesting people. Like I'd need 28 hours a day just to listen to podcasts and videos and books. Like I don't read anywhere near enough of what I should, and so that's the problem. Is there's nearly too much information, and how do you become selective? And so I think you need to work out what area you want to be better in, and sort of target that, And so, and that's the difficult part. And unfortunately for me, I've got about 10 areas I want to be better in. So I've got about 10 books on the go and 10 different podcasts. But for me, that's the thing is what areas do I want to be better in, and how can I be influenced by certain people, and sometimes you end up you see this video or this podcast, and then that leads you on to another one. All of a sudden, you're in this area that you hadn't thought about getting to, but it's just taking you there. And so that's one of the great things about, I guess in a way, modern technology and the way the world's moving is that there is a lot of information, a lot of good people out there. But I still like reading books.
Mm-hmm. Is there one particular area that you're into now that you're working on?
Well, there's a couple. Like, so at the moment, I'm reading a book called Great Expectations, which is about how to raise children.
Okay.
Which I got onto because I read a book called Training Soccer Champions by Anselm Dorrance. Okay. And in there he talks about placing expectations on players, and he's obviously an extremely successful soccer coach and done some great things, and he talks about he read this book Great Expectations, and talks about how you set standards and expectations for your children and make sure that you live them, because I don't know if you have kids and if you do, where they're at, but
not yet. But
okay, well, you're going to come to it at some stage, right? But they test you every day in every way, and it's like, one of the examples he gave was that he had a 5-year-old kid, and it's like they tell him to put his plate in the dishwasher, and he's like rolls his eyes and I'll do it later. And there's this moment of confrontation where you either leave the kid and go, okay, yep, you do it later in your time when you want, or no, you do it now when I've asked you to. And if you leave it later, then most of the time he'll probably just leave it and you end up picking it up and putting it in the dishwasher. And it's like, well, you've eliminated the confrontation, but you've set a low standard for your child. And so, every day I struggle with what's the right way to go about raising my kids and what standards and expectations do I hold them to. So I thought, should I better read this book and try and get an understanding? But it translates into your work as a coach, because it's what standards and expectations do you hold your players to, and how do you go about confronting those situations and dealing with it when they don't meet those standards and expectations, So that's one of the things I'm looking at the moment. I just bought a book called Breath, which is all about breathing and, and how does that affect performance and mental state and all those sort of things, and just breathing properly for a better life. And, so I've got a few different books on the go at the moment, as I always tend to do. But, that's what I'm trying to work out now.
Interesting. Nice, mate.
Yeah.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. It's been really good. Yeah. Anyone that wants to know more about you, your journey, what you're doing at the Storm, is there a best place for people to go? Look,
I have a Twitter account, but I don't do anything on it. Yeah. I read, I try and follow some people and I read some interesting articles, but I don't put anything out. And that's, sometimes I don't look at it for a week, and then I'll scroll through and try and find some interesting stuff. And so one of the things I thought about was I need to be better with that. But I'm not big into social media and putting things out, but I like to learn from it. But apart from that, no.
Okay.
Listen to your podcast maybe, and that's about it.
Love it. No, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's fine, mate. Yeah. People can have a look on the Twitter and.
Yeah, they're not going to get much out of me. Sorry. Yeah, unfortunately.
Nice, mate. Yeah. Well, thank you for giving up your time. Thank you for
thanks for that. Appreciate it.
No, it's I really do appreciate it. So hang around, we'll have a little chat, but I'll officially I'll let you go. But thanks, mate.
No worries.
Speak soon.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, mate.
No worries.